You know, some stories from history are just epic. They're full of famous battles, detailed diaries, big, loud events. But a lot of other lives are more like whispers. They're quiet stories that you have to piece together, almost like a detective, clue by clue. And today, we're going to reconstruct one of those exact lives. Marianne Vaux, a woman from the 19th century whose story is a truly fascinating historical puzzle.
So that's the big question, right? When someone doesn't leave behind any letters or journals or memoirs, how in the world do you tell their story? Well, that's when you have to become a kind of historical detective. You follow this faint paper trail of official documents to try and uncover a life that's been hidden in the records for over a century.
All right, let's jump right in. Now, you'd probably think we'd start at the beginning of her life, with her birth. But no. This whole detective story kicks off in a really unexpected place, decades after Marianne's death, with one single, absolutely crucial document from the West Coast.
That's right, 1931. This document isn't even for Marianne. It's for her daughter, Abigail, who passed away almost 50 years after her mother did. At first glance, you'd think, what does this have to do with anything? It's just a bureaucratic form, filed hundreds of miles away from where Marianne lived and died. But on this one piece of paper is the clue that unlocks everything.
And here it is. This is the whole ballgame. When the person providing the information for Abigail's death certificate was asked for her mother's name, they didn't just write Marianne Vaux. They gave her maiden name, Marianne Underhill. That one word, Underhill, is the absolute linchpin for this entire story. Without it, her family history, her origins, they'd still be a total mystery. It's the key that lets us finally unlock the past.
So, with that key in our hands, we can finally rewind all the way back to the beginning. That single name, Underhill, lets us start building the very foundation of her life story.
And there she is. All because of that future death certificate in California, we know her maiden name was Underhill. And from that, other records tell us she was born on March 5, 1815, in a place called Aurora, New York. She was the fourth of 5 kids born to Amos and Mary Underhill. Just like that, she's no longer a mystery. She has a time, a place, and a family. Okay, so what about her marriage to Samuel Vaux? Well, this is tricky because there's no official marriage record that's ever been found. So how do we figure out when they got married? This is where that detective work comes in again. We know their first child was born around 1839. So you just work backwards. Genealogists make an educated guess. They infer a marriage date of about 1837. She would have been 22. He would have been 21. It's a really logical deduction when the paper trail just goes cold.
And together, Marianne and Samuel had a big family. 6 children, all of them born back in Aurora, New York. And this list, it's not just a bunch of names and dates. This was her entire world. And would you look at that? The third one down, Abigail A. Vaux, born in 1844. Yep, that's her. The very same Abigail whose death certificate in 1931 gave us the key to unlocking her mother's story.
But this family, they didn't stay put in New York. Their lives pretty quickly became part of a much bigger American story, the great westward expansion of the 19th century.
Just look at this journey. I mean, it's incredible. They spend the first big chunk of their lives in New York. Then around 1854, they make this huge leap out to Wisconsin. 15 years go by, and they move again, this time south to Missouri. And finally, by 1880, they've settled down in Kansas. This wasn't just one move. This was a lifetime of migration, pushing west across a growing country.
So how does a family just pick up and fund a move like that? Well, this number right here is the answer. In 1853, right before they left New York for good, Samuel and Marianne sold their 53-acre farm, and they got $1,500 for it. That money was their nest egg, their ticket to starting a new life as pioneers out west.
So how can we be so sure about this journey? How do we track them? Well, it's because we can follow the paper trail they left behind, especially in the U.S. Census records.
These census records are amazing. They're like little snapshots of the family, taken once every 10 years. In 1850, there they are in New York, a young farmer, his wife, and 4 little kids. Then we jump ahead 20 years to 1870, and now they're in Missouri. The family has exploded. You've got grown kids, a son-in-law, and grandkids all living under the same roof. And by 1880, they're in Kansas. Samuel and Marianne are 65 years old now, and they're living with their daughter Abigail's family. You can literally watch a family's entire life story unfold through these documents. But here's the thing about historical research. It is never neat and tidy. The records don't always agree with each other. In fact, sometimes the official documents, even the ones that are literally carved in stone, can be flat out wrong.
Which brings us to this really fascinating conflict about the day Mary Ann actually died. A local newspaper notice from November of 1882 is very clear. It says she passed away on November 3rd of that year. But if you go look at her actual gravestone in Kansas, it's inscribed with the date November 2nd, 1883. It's off by a full year and a day. After looking at all the evidence, researchers are pretty sure the newspaper is the correct one. It just goes to show you, sometimes you can't even trust what's written in stone.
So let's turn to that final chapter now. Because beyond the conflicting dates and the census data, we have one more type of record, obituaries. And these give us a glimpse not just of how a person lived, but how they were remembered by the people around them.
This beautiful, simple line comes from her obituary in a Concordia, Kansas newspaper. And in an instant, she goes from being just a name in a record book to a real person, a beloved member of her community, someone who lived a useful life, and, just as important, someone who had a great many friends. And this really brings her whole story full circle. The obituary celebrates what was clearly her greatest legacy, her children. It says she raised this large family, and then it calls them nice people and valuable acquisitions to society. It's just such a warm human tribute, and it's a world away from the cold, hard facts of the census. But even after all of this detective work, after piecing all these clues together, from California all the way back to New York, it's so important to remember that the story is never really finished. There are still big missing pieces to this puzzle.
We still don't have that definitive marriage record for her and Samuel. The family also seems to have just vanished from the 1860 census when they were living in Wisconsin. It's a total blank, and we don't have any probate records, so we have no idea what they owned or left behind when they died. These are the kinds of gaps that keep researchers searching.
And that really is the big takeaway from a life like Mary Ann's. Trying to reconstruct the past is like building a beautiful mosaic, but you only have some of the tiles. We can see the shape, we can see the colors, we can see the broad strokes of a life well lived, but that complete, perfect picture often stays just a little bit out of our reach.
Which leaves us with one last thing to think about. Mary Ann Vaux left a trail of farm deeds, census forms, and newspaper clippings. We're leaving behind a trail of emails, social media posts, and countless digital files. So, 150 years from now, when some future historian tries to piece your life together, what story is your paper trail going to tell?